Hi.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome, Mr. Williams. Welcome, everybody. In order for this meeting to proceed as well as possible, I have to mute you all in the beginning, and then everybody will voice his concern and everything based on the state of debate. So sorry, I have to mute you all right now. Okay. Honorable Mr. Williams, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to Coffee Talk 1.7.1. I am Enes Shehu, your moderator for tonight. On behalf of UNYA, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this event on UN75 Igniting the Dialogue. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, and I hope you will find the event very pleasant and informative. On the same time, I want to thank all of our audience in social media which are following our live stream, and I want to encourage them to participate in the discussion round by commenting their questions. Our staff will make sure that all of your concerns will be heard in this event. Also, please, as indicated in the email that we sent you, we would like you to write hashtag join UN75 on a blank page in order to take a picture in the end of the event and make a memory out of it. Before the event truly begins, I would like to give the warm welcome to Mr. Brian Williams, the resident coordinator of UN in Albania, who honored us with his presence tonight. Mr. Williams, thank you for supporting such youth initiatives in times of global pandemic. It is extremely important to us as youth organization. It is extremely important to us as a youth organization that you are helping us to shape our future together. Thank you, Mr. Williams. On the other hand, I want to thank again everyone participating tonight. Fellow participants, it is crucial for everyone to have his or her say in shaping the future we want. And by participating in this event, we are contributing to this factor more than we think. You are becoming part of the largest dialogue that was ever launched. You are becoming part of UN75. The event of Coffee Talk 1.7.1, brought to you by UNYA and UN in Albania, will serve to fulfill a part of this mission, because each conversation is an opportunity to encourage individuals to take actions in their own lives in line with what they have heard and learned. Before I give the floor to Christy and Clyde, who will provide us a short introduction of UNYA and UN75, I would like to remind you the discussion round instructions. In case you want to say something, please comment on the chat window by hashtag #IGotAPoint. You have 2 minutes to voice your concern. I would highly appreciate if you respect your time. Our team will prepare a list of speakers based on the comments order. All of you will be listened. Now, I'd like to give the floor to Christy and Clyde in order to let them provide us a short introduction of UNYA and UN75. Yep, Christy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Enes. My name is Christy. I'm the president of the UN Association Albania, and I would like to join Enes in welcoming you all today and thanking you for deciding to spend this evening in a productive way by joining the global conversation. I would also especially like to thank Mr. Brian Williams, who took time from his busy agenda to join us today as part of this event. So I think that most of you know of or have heard of the UN75 initiative. It is meant to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, but in a special and different way. So this time the UN has chosen to listen, to launch the largest global conversation and to hear from every citizen of the world about the way they see the present, the way they want the future to look like, and what can every one of us do and what actions we can undertake to reach that common vision. This event is organized in the framework of the UN75 initiative, which we as a youth-led association are helping to encourage and to promote this initiative with Albanian youth but with the support of an incredible work of the UN country team in Albania. This event today is also organized on the International Day of Multilateralism and Diplomacy for Peace, which will also be a topic of this conversation. So this event today is important because, first of all, gives you the opportunity to join the global discussion. So it eliminates any barrier that you might have. So you do not have to fly to New York or Geneva to join the global conversation, but you can do it from your home. And you can encourage other people to do so, and also contribute to the betterment of the dialogue and of the society. So this event is also registered with the official UN75 initiative and website, and all your recommendations and ideas will be gathered and will be sent to UN headquarters, where they will be processed, analyzed, and then be given to the heads of states and governments in September at the UN General Assembly, for them to see the recommendation of the citizens and to think of follow-up actions in reaffirming the need for multilateralism. So I would like to invite you to use this opportunity to voice your ideas and concern, to ask also questions to Mr. Brown-Williams, but also to give him solutions and ideas on how we can together improve our work. So without further ado, I look forward for a really nice conversation, to hear all of your ideas, and I yield my floor back to Enes.
Thank you very much, Christy. Thank you very much for such an insightful explanation. And now, with no further ado, it is time for Mr. Williams to provide us with an expert point of view regarding to this topic. Mr. Williams, the floor is yours.
So good evening, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you, Enes. Thank you, Christy. It's really exciting to see so many young people on a 6 p.m. on a Friday willing to spend a couple of hours to talk about the future of the world, the future of their country, the future of their sub-region. Of course, you can't go out, so that helps a little bit to have you be interested in this, but hopefully you would have done it anyway. 6 p.m. is too early to go out, even if we could. Look, Christy did a great job presenting what UN75 is. It's really trying to not be a traditional birthday celebration that looks at the past and somehow celebrates all the wonderful things that we've done, even if that is a tempting thing to do. But really to turn it in, as Christy says, to a listening opportunity, to a listening occasion where we hear from everybody. And this evening we're hearing from youth, but the idea is to have a dialogue that involves all kinds of people all over the world, and hear from you about what your biggest concerns are for the future. The idea a little bit is to think about the 100 years anniversary of the United Nations, and that would be 2045. So even longer in advance than what the Sustainable Development Goals are. So it's a bit tricky to, think about that, but that's exactly what we want you to do, is to try and have you shut your eyes a little bit and try to imagine 25 years from now. Where will you be 25 years from now? That's always a hard thing to imagine. But what kind of world is it that you would like to be living in that time, 25 years from now? And in the conversations that we're going to have this evening, is really quite open. We can think about the whole world, so global issues. What does the situation of global peace? What does the situation of the environment globally? What does trade look like? What are relations between countries? What do they look like 25 years from now? But also closer to home, so sub-regionally. I've spent the last 4 years, it's been a real privilege to live in Albania and learn about Albania. And one of the things I've learned is that the sub-region is really quite important. So the relations for Albania with Greece and with Italy, but also with the other Western Balkan countries, I think has a really big impact on how Albania develops. So what do you think about how those relations could shift and could change? I have one of my colleagues in my office has taken a 6-month assignment from my office here in Tirana to go work for 6 months for a regional project in Belgrade. And I've spoken to her a few times, and you know, it's really interesting to hear her commentary about what it's like to be an Albanian who is suddenly living in Belgrade and finding their way around society there. So sub-regionally, what's happening sub-regionally? And then of course nationally. So, you know, what do you want Tirana to look like 25 years from now? What about the other cities of Albania? What about the countryside? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it more populated? Is it less populated? What does tourism look like? You know, have the Albanian beaches turned into the French Riviera, or is there a different kind of vision that you have for Albania in the future? So let's think about global, sub-regional, and national. I want to say a word or two about EU accession. So in my time here, of course, the accession to the European Union is always at the center of many political discussions and even of social discussions. The hopes that, you know, negotiations will start soon, how quickly one might become a member of the EU. Clearly that is important, and clearly it is something that is like an aspiration for almost all Albanians. But let's think a little bit about what it actually means to be in the EU. I mean, what is the purpose of being in the EU? And I find myself talking often about the Sustainable Development Goals, and I think about them in relation to the European Union, because really, I think the reason to be in the European Union is not just to say, okay, I'm in. It's because the quality of life for Albanians is going to get better. So it means the schools are likely to be a little bit better if you're in the EU. And healthcare might be a little bit better if you're in the EU. And some of those environmental protections that come with being in the EU, they might apply more here in Albania. So, I mean, challenge yourself a little bit, and when you're having conversations this evening or with others, think about what's really behind this desire to be in the EU, because whatever that desire is, maybe there's other ways to work on achieving it, even in the meantime, because it's going to take some time to join the EU. When we're thinking about a couple more comments, and then I will stop, because the point is really to listen to your suggestions and your comments and your advice. Global public goals, global public goods. So one of the things, I mean, I will talk about COVID here in a minute before I stop, but there are these things like the environment and protection from pandemics, so protection from the virus, that are completely global in nature. They really don't recognize borders. And how do we manage these global public goods? Because if you look at what's happened with COVID over the last month, you see a few different reactions. You see many countries who instinctively start to retreat into themselves as a country, and they think about, okay, how do I protect myself and my people? Is a normal reaction? Is a good reaction? Okay, governments should take care of their people, so they want to protect it. But if every country just starts sort of thinking only about themselves, there are some consequences for how we manage some of these global public goods. And even in the beginning, you know, there was this thing around the EU that says, okay, actually we should do some things together. That's good. They say maybe we can buy some medical equipment, maybe we can do some of this procurement together as the EU. That's good. But for a little while there, it looked like it was going to shut out the Western Balkans. And the Western Balkans said, you know, hey, this doesn't seem, you know, like you want us to join you after all, if, you know, immediately you start to take care of yourselves. Now, in this case, is a nice story, at least in a small way, because it was the speakers of parliament from all of the Western Balkan nations who collectively wrote a letter to Brussels. And it was that kind of collective action. Honestly, it caught a little bit of attention in Brussels. This is okay. It's not so often that all of the Western Balkan countries, you know, can so quickly agree on something and do something together. So there's some good stories in here, right? There's some evidence of the power of working together and working with people who are maybe not your best friends, but when you agree on something and you're not necessarily the same, that can be powerful. And it's that working together doesn't happen always so automatically. So the instincts are often to take care of the innermost circle, your nation, your village, your town, your family, but that some of the solutions that our world is facing for the coming years require a kind of cooperation. And how do we manage to do that? How do we convince our political leaders, our community leaders, our friends, how do we convince them that this kind of extra effort is really worth it? There was an earthquake. Poor Albania had a crisis in November, and we thought, okay, you know, we've had enough crises for 10 years, but now we have COVID too. Around the earthquake, I'm sure you all heard the phrase, we used it a lot in the post-disaster needs assessment called build back better. So the idea is you don't just rebuild the apartment building the way it was before, but you build it better. And what we're talking about now with the COVID response, with COVID, because there will be a kind of recovery from COVID, is going to be long because it's difficult for the science to catch up. But we have learned about ways to manage it. And even here in Albania, honestly, the situation is much better than I think we feared it might have been at the beginning of this. I think many people were quite worried. So the things have been better than we feared. But still, it's going to take some time, and there's a recovery that's going to have to happen. So what kinds of things can we do in this recovery to make the recovery better? So make the recovery better is like build back better. So not just getting everybody back to the position that they were before, but somehow getting people into a better position and not losing on the SDGs, but even accelerating more quickly. So this is, you know, really, these are big questions. They're broad questions. It's hard. It requires some imagination to really think about what life is going to be like in 10 or 15 or 25 years. But it's not too early to start working on them. And I'm really curious to hear from you about what you're thinking about, what you would like to see the world look like. What do you think the government, what do you think community leaders, what do you think international organizations, what can we do to support some of those ambitions? So, thank you. Enes, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. Thank you for such detailed and thoughtful remarks. And your presence and your opinions here tonight in time of pandemic of COVID-19 are extremely important to us as a youth organization to have such strong, it's extremely important to us to have such strong support in order to progress. This way, as a citizen, as a parent, as a professional, you are helping us, the youth, to shape our future together. Thank you very much. And now I would welcome everybody to the next stage of this discussion. Now it is time to shift our discussion into a more dynamic manner. Firstly, I would like to thank you for providing such insightful and qualitative applications. Based on this fact, it is pretty sure that you have many questions, concerns, and point of views that you'd like to share with us tonight. We would like to welcome you to the most important part of the event, the discussion round. Before starting, I would like to make some explanations about how it is going to be structured. The discussion round will last around 80 minutes. In total, we'll have 4 subtopics which are going to be discussed for 20 minutes each. After a short elaboration of each topic by me, Christy, Clyde, and Tatiana, the floor will be yours. The floor will be to the participants in order to give their point of views, opinions, comments, questions, and most importantly, analyze every aspect you think is necessary to be discussed regarding to the topic. Please keep in mind that in order to voice your concerns, you'll have to comment on the chat window regarding to the instructions we provided in the beginning, and it is essential to respect the 2-minute time of talking in order to give everybody the space to voice its concerns and make discussion more productive. With no further ado, I would like to jump to the first topic for tonight. The progress of the United Nations in advancing multilateralism and liberal international order. It is very important to dedicate some time to the progress of the UN through its specialized agencies in advancing multilateralism and liberal international order. Since the start of the UN in 1945, many global initiatives have taken place, starting from the environmental policy to the protection of human rights and peacekeeping. The United Nations has had a crucial role and has advanced its mission to make the world a better place. And we all agree to that. In the age of globalization, almost all countries on Earth are interconnected. Conflicts raging thousands of miles away may have a direct impact on people's lives. Phenomena such as climate change or, moreover, COVID-19, which is present nowadays, can cause problems that do not stop at any border, which is why multilateral cooperation is very important. Maybe it's more important than ever today. The Alliance for Multilateralism. It's a new policy for countries to work together in a wide range of policy areas that are committed to preserving and further developing a rule-based order. The aim of it is to reinforce the values of the UN, strengthen cooperation, enhance the legitimacy of fair rule, and tackle the challenges of the future together. On the other hand, we have faced many progressions regarding to the liberal international order. They range from signs of progress to relapses and vice versa according to specific aspects. To illustrate this progression, I can remind you that during the last decade, we have faced many notable political events in the national and international spectrum, such as Trump focusing his anger in NATO and the World Trade Organization, Brexit, and the rapid rise of nationalist parties. Indeed, all of these events have made many people nowadays think that democracy, globalism, and free trade are under assault. But the lack of precision by what is meant by the liberal international order is an issue to be discussed. Such point of views have generated a balance of almost 50-50 regarding to the role of United Nations. Many people think that United Nations has been successful, but many others think that it should have done more. So I would like to have a question for you. Is the progress that the United Nations has made enough to tackle and stabilize such phenomena? Is it just a goodwill that fortunately correlates with the national progress of the countries? And this is where I give the floor to the participants to make all of the comments, point of views, and analysis. Please keep in mind that in order to voice your concerns, you have to write your comment on the chat window, and I'll give you the permission to talk and the right time. So, anybody who has some questions on this topic? I guess there are a lot. And first I'll start with Daniel. Daniel?
Yes. So, hello everyone. Thank you, Enes. My name is Daniel. I'm a student, well, recently graduated of international and European law. And considering that this event is, as many others, is done in the context of the UN75 Dialogue, I will continue the trend and use this moment as a moment to reflect on what the organization has achieved on global issues, such as security and the avoiding conflicts between and within states through preventive diplomacy and its instruments, and in order to scrutinize what actions is the UN taking in regards to the most recent issues, such as the climate crisis, as you mentioned, the mass immigration, which is a result of, unfortunately, of conflict within states mostly, and more recently and more unfortunately, the obstruction of democratic processes in certain countries. However, all things considered, the UN still represents, which represents the efforts to institutionalize the notion of international liberal order, as explained. This institution still remains the best instrument to inform, to collectively identify, understand, and address common challenges. I say this because the UN as an institution, it does dispose the necessary pool of expertise, information, and knowledge to make a substantial impact. But whether the UN does indeed deliver such results is not only dependent on its effort and on the goodwill of the UN. but on the individual member states and their interest to use the UN and its platform to come up with the best practices, and the interest to renew and reform this organization in order to make it fit to operate in the modern context. My opinion is that what is sometimes perceived as a lack of ineffectiveness from the UN is not because of its efforts, but because of the legal instruments upon which it operates and on the institutional architecture which it holds. But as our best and hope and our best initiative to create a competent and cooperative world organization, the UN does have the mandate to address the pressing issues, but lacks resources. However, in time it has been able to, through what I believe to be the highlight of the UN, the creation of these specialized agencies which act upon specific matters, it has been able to create a good framework of institutions which are invested in developing and the countries in which they operate. I believe that we can now afford to be ambitious and switch from striving to achieving, to have some results. But coming up to the the underlying question on how we see the world in the near future, how I would imagine the world in the near future is not very different from what people a decade ago or two would imagine today. Meaning that making progress on the issues which we are currently invested in, and brainstorming on how to address the issues which will eventually come up in the near future. However, what my hope is that the world of tomorrow finds us better equipped and with better instruments, and that the debate revolves around choosing the best method to tackle these practices and not in doubt whether the international liberal order is the way ahead. Thank you, Enes.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Please, I want to remind everybody that you have 2 minutes time to talk. Otherwise, you'll be muted. But thank you very much, Daniel. Now we have a point from Barbara. Barbara, I guess the floor is yours. Let me unmute
thank you.
a sec. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I unmuted it. Hello, everyone. My name is Barbara. I'm an architecture student, and I've been studying abroad, but I came back in Albania just a few months ago, which has made me sometimes excited, sometimes not. First of all, I hope that all of you are safe. For me, 2020 will be surely remembered as the year of the pandemic, and I think it has changed our lives in a lot of ways. For example, I know that we are talking now about the progress of UN, but we always have to look back at what's happening in the world. So sometimes it looks very hard, actually, to keep up with all the changes. For example, if we'd have this video call, I think maybe 2 months ago or 3 months ago, our conversation would be different. I think because of the COVID-19, for example, today the healthcare system is becoming more and more important. Matters as education is becoming more and more important. Technology and how it affects our lives is becoming more and more important. But every country is facing different issues, even though because of globalism, we are all experiencing COVID-19 almost in the same way. We still have our differences, and every country, I think, should set its own priorities. And for my country, I think maybe even from a lot of Western Balkans, the priorities are not the same as a UN country, for example. Of EU country. For example, we are still fighting with corruption, which is affecting every part of our life. It's affecting our taxation system, it's affecting our salaries, it's impacting our opportunities, our equality. For example, in Tirana, the education system is much different from what it is in the city of my origin, Burel, where my cousins are not even getting education right now. And they are not attending any class or any part of the school year. So I think what is important to me is actually to engage our generation into politics. And what do I mean by politics? I do not mean to engage them in political parties, because in Albania, I think this is the mistake we do. Sometimes to get our voice heard, we choose platforms that are part of a party, but we have to understand that we can create a platform, or we can join a platform like UN is, which has given voice to a lot of youth to give their opinions and to make a difference. What I would want from my peers around the country is to be different from the ones that are leading the country now, to make a difference, to stand up, to raise their voice, and to really do everything that they think by their heart.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Your analysis is noted. And I want to give the floor to Arsild. Arsild, please. Arsild?
Yeah. Hello. I'm Arsild. I am a student of European Studies in Law and Economics. I wanted to actually first recognize the importance of such a debate on UN75, because I feel it's an initiative that is not driven for the first time because of a very important need, or very sharp need, or sharp criticisms about it, but it's driven by a major dialogue which involves and includes everyone. So I feel this is the best way to start thinking about the world of tomorrow. Said that, I would like to dwell a bit on what Daniel said earlier on the institutional architecture and what is commonly perceived as a lack of efficiency because of UN, but it could be also the members, the nations can be held accountable for that too. This is why I feel at the moment the institutional architecture of the UN is probably outdated. And while discussions for reforms have always been in place, this time probably at the times that we live, where issues are more complex, challenges that we face are of a global dimension, the UN needs to keep up to speed with these kind of issues. In this sense, I think that the dialogue should be also focused on pushing on an agenda that creates the platform and the opportunity to have a substantial reform on the structural organization. The current configuration of such organization, it's not facing in an efficient way, and it's actually not the UN's fault, in my opinion. We need to create a platform, the facilities for multilateralism to be efficient and relevant. We can keep discussing on that, because this is like just the tip of an iceberg. It's a very complex issue. But I would like to, I think this is the main point where we can start the dialogue for multilateralism. Thank you, everyone.
Many thanks, Arsild. And I would like to give the floor to Alessia. Please, Alessia.
Well, hi everyone. My name is Alessia. I just finished my master's in human rights at LSE. It's a great pleasure to be here with you and just to have the opportunity to hear such valuable thoughts. This is my first UN75 dialogue, so I'm very interested to hear your opinions and just be part of this big conversation. Just to follow up on the idea and opinions that Barbara said before, and how I was thinking to myself how this we talk about youth representation, and we talk about being part of the dialogue, but with such big issues and such big pandemics like COVID-19, I feel like we as people, we have had a step back, and we have realized all the problems that are showing up in all the socioeconomical systems all around the world. And I keep thinking to myself, if we talk about youth representation, are we the youth representation of the whole country of Albania? Who has access to this representation, if I'm going to say in quotation marks? With COVID-19, for example, we have the opportunity and the luxury, in a way, to be part of this conversation through Zoom, through having a laptop and just having social media and all these technologies. But let's say a kid or someone else who lives in a rural area in Albania doesn't have these opportunities. So what I'm trying to say is, yes, we want to talk about inclusivity, but how do we push this, and how do we try to make this available to everyone else? I know it's a very broad topic, but it just keeps me thinking, how is this youth represented? And all of this inclusivity and all the inequalities that are in Albania, but not only, but in all places in the world. I know, for example, a lot of kids that go to school don't have the opportunity to, don't even have a laptop, or just to follow up their lessons online. So it's just a thing that just made me thinking.
Very well stated. Thank you very much, Alessia. And I see there are no further people who'd like to voice their concerns in here and make their opinions. So with no further ado, I would like Mr. Williams to share with us his opinions and remarks regarding to this topic. Mr. Williams, the floor is yours.
Okay, good. So thank you very much. Super interesting. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to say back everything I thought of while I was listening to all of you, but let's try. About the UN and its structures, I'm impressed by how much those who spoke already are aware of the UN and how it works, and you were quite kind to us, I think, a little bit gentle with us. It's true that the structure of the UN makes it difficult to sort of have executive functions. It's very hard for the UN just to go out and do something that seems like it's the right thing to do, because the UN is a club of governments, and it's those governments that are the members of the UN, and we're very much constrained by having to pay attention to what our own membership wants of us. And we don't have to go back very many days to see some examples of this. I'm sure you all saw a few days ago that President Trump in the US said that he would suspend financing for the World Health Organization. And his concern was that the World Health Organization was somehow not being as direct or as forthright as it should have been with China. And in a sense, he accused the WHO of somehow playing favorites with China. I think what is ironic about President Trump's action is that his behavior revealed exactly why it is that the UN is quite weak. I mean, he immediately said, okay, I'm a member and I don't like you anymore because I don't like what you did. And the problem for the UN is that we have all these members. Some are more powerful than others. That's just a fact. And we're quite constrained by having to pay attention to what bigger member states do. This week it was the President Trump who maybe looked like he was not being particularly supportive of the United Nations, but rest assured, it is certainly not only the US. There are countries all over the world who do things that are not what we as the United Nations would like to see happen, whether it's around human rights or anything else. Even UNFPA, a UN organization that you haven't heard of maybe so often, it's the United Nations Fund for Population, and they deal a lot with sexual and reproductive health of young people, of everybody, women. And they sometimes have had their funding cut also because they support sexual and reproductive rights for women that some countries don't like. So the United Nations is always struggling a little bit with this balance between trying to be outspoken and yet having to be careful about what our members want. And of course, the members finance us, so that's very important as well. On some of the core work of the United Nations, like peace, you will have seen also a couple of weeks ago, in the middle of the COVID crisis, the Secretary General issued a call for a global ceasefire. Personally, I think this was a brilliant move by him, not because we have an unrealistic expectation that all the wars around the world are suddenly going to stop, but because he used the fact that he's getting a lot of attention right now because of COVID. So COVID is a global thing, so people turn naturally to the United Nations as a global organization. And he has an opportunity to say, with this platform, everybody's looking at him to say, you know, what are you going to say? And he says, you know what? I want to make a connection to war. And I want to make a connection to peace. Because it is absurd that in 2020, there are still these violent conflicts occurring in the planet when we have all the means in the world to address conflict in other ways. And especially now, when we have this new global challenge that we need to work together on, it makes no sense. It is so obviously unhelpful to be having wars going on somewhere when we need to be doing other things to combat COVID-19. So I think is a good example of how the UN can use its moral power, can use its voice to try to work on some of these core issues, like even the most fundamental of all, which is peace. In terms of some of the issues that you raised, I mean, look, education, healthcare, technology, absolutely. One of the things that we'd love to have your voice on, not just 25 years from now, but even tomorrow, is that there should be a greater investment in healthcare and in education. We, as the UN in Albania, are on record as having publicly advocated that a percentage of government spending on healthcare and education should go up. We think if Albania wants to be a European country, then it should spend the amounts of money proportionally, given whatever much money it has, but as a percentage of GDP, should spend the kinds of percentages that European countries do. And that would mean a doubling, roughly, of spending in healthcare, a doubling of spending in education. I think it's important that it is underlined that spending in education and spending in healthcare is not just about meeting a human right. It's not a luxury. Okay, it is about human rights. I know there's a human rights lawyer there who's going to criticize me if I say it's not a human right. It is a human right, but it's not a luxury. It is also an investment. If you invest in your healthcare system, okay, if the healthcare system was even better, it could better prevent the spread of COVID, and that would allow the economy and people to go back to work more quickly. The government would have to spend less money feeding people while we're under lockdown, and so on. So spending money in healthcare is an investment. Even more so, obviously, in education. Spending in education is an investment. It is not a luxury. And as Albania wants to move towards an information technology economy, that's all the more important. I thought the comments, there were a couple of comments about inequality within Albania. So, privileged, the university students privileged to be on a Zoom meeting, whereas up in Burel or in other parts of the country, or poorer people might not have that opportunity. That's absolutely true, and is nice to hear you thinking about it. It also, I think, presents an opportunity for this recover better idea that I was mentioning before. So right now, I mean, I've talked to some of my colleagues whose kids are in public schools in Tirana, and I've asked them, how's it going with the distance learning? And it's going a little bit. It's not great, but it's going. But in other parts of the country, in rural areas, maybe it's not happening at all. So can we work on the digital access, internet access, the equipment maybe that's needed for rural schools, more iPads or something for the kids so that they can do distance learning? This would help, of course, under the current circumstances of distance learning, but it would also be something that is more helpful going forward for education, because all kids now need to have digital access. It's the way the world works. If they're going to be a productive adult, they need to have every advantage and have digital access even as a kid. So this is an example of maybe how we can invest in the response to COVID, not just the healthcare response, but the socioeconomic response, and do it in a way that gets us to an even better place afterwards. I wanted to make one last comment, if I may, Enes, which is, I think the last speaker was talking about political engagement, but not necessarily political party engagement. Democratic systems are built on voting and are built on political parties. So the desire, when we're frustrated with political parties, to avoid them altogether, I worry about that, because what that does is it leaves the space about competing for power to the parties that are there. And if you don't engage with those structures, then you leave it to others and they might carry on the way they've always carried on. So I think we don't want to abandon the traditional mechanisms of power, because they still have the levers of power. But what I do think is really good about what you said is that there's lots of non-political party ways in addition of engagement. And in the 4 years that I've been in Albania, the movement in the streets that I think resonated the most with the population, and in some ways was the most powerful movement in the streets, was the student protests of December 2018, I guess it was. And they were powerful precisely because they were not associated with the political movement. We're disappointed, I think, that in June, let me say this carefully, you guys are probably recording this. In June of 2019, we're disappointed that the voting that took place was not a fully participatory, all political parties and everybody engaging kind of exercise. The United Nations was involved in 2015 in supporting the territorial reform that led to the new municipalities, and the elections in 2019 should have been the first election where people were voting on the performance of the last 4 years of a particular mayor or of a particular mayor's party, and had an opportunity to vote and taking that into account. We were looking forward as the UN to helping to organize debates, not choosing one side or the other, but to say, on education, let's hear from the candidates what you think about education in your municipality. Let's hear what you have to say about investment in agriculture versus investment in roads, or whatever the issue might be. Let's hear what you have to say about gender equality. But unfortunately, because of the way things turned out, we weren't able to have that kind of debate around issues. So I think we'd love to see this kind of engagement that is political in nature, because it's about society. And if you're going to address a concern about society, that somehow makes it political, even if it's not a political party. So how can we find ways to organize, how can you find ways to organize around issues that are not necessarily about a party directly, but which can influence what all those parties are going to do with the power that they have? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. Thank you very much for such exceptional and thoughtful remarks. I'm pretty sure that all participants found them very highly informative. So, well, I assume that we have no further time to proceed with this topic anymore, but a better one is coming up. And now it's time to jump to the second topic for tonight. Tatiana, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, I'm Tatiana. It was really nice to hear from you what you believe that the UN has done, what it is doing, and what it should do in order to get to a better future. But in order to do all that, we need to overcome some risks, right? And you were asked in your application, which risks do you think, which current trends
will mostly affect the sustainability of the future. And the three mostly chosen, let's say, risks were that of the climate, so the climate crisis, health-related risks, and those arising from new technologies. Now, we are currently in a situation that I believe is a living proof of how the disruption of one of these trends can inevitably lead to the disruption of the rest. So even only in health, the pandemic is not just directly putting people's lives at stake, but it is also indirectly leading to unemployment, and that means that in the future they will have less money to afford any form of medical care, right? So on the other side, we have seen air pollution levels plummeting with the reduction of human activity, which is undeniable evidence that it is our day-to-day actions that have led to the crisis to begin with. Yet, this is not a long-term solution. We have seen what happened in China. Yes, when the lockdown measures were firstly taken, we had a sharp decline of pollution, but then once the economy started restarting again, what happened? We had again the nitrogen dioxide levels rising. So that means that by stopping economy altogether will not bring the solution to the problem, to the climate crisis. Then we have technologies. The one thing that can actually help solve the other problems is currently being seen as one of the biggest risks. Because even in a time like this, in order to make sure that we are preventing the spread of the virus and that people are respecting isolation rules, people are feeling that their privacy is being disturbed, so that they're being surveilled and for tracking reasons. So following that train of thought and your own wise, because it was mentioned in your own applications, how the environmental pollution impacts health and how technologies should be used for solutions. How do you see these three, so the climate, health, and tech risks, being interconnected as the biggest threats to a sustainable future? And how do you think that this link between them, this connection, can be used in order so that they benefit from each other? So the floor is yours.
Yep, thank you very much, Tatiana. And it is time to hear your concerns. It's time to hear what your concerns are. And I'm sure that such a topic has generated many issues to ask. It's the most recent and the most debatable topic nowadays. So please raise your points. And I'm giving the floor to Johan first. Johan?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for accepting me in this coffee talk session. I'm Johan Piluri. I'm currently studying Communications for Development, master's degree in Tirana. And about the point that the previous talker said, I would like to point out about the impact that the coronavirus has had on the air pollution, on the waters cleaning, wildlife, everything. So first of all, I might say that I like to be an optimistic person and probably see my cup of coffee half full. And the thing that I have seen in this situation that is very positive is the air pollution going down, as we have seen in certain photos, for example, Tirana, maybe even other more polluted countries, India, China, LA, currently I've seen. So also the impact on the water and its cleaning, the wildlife returning to the shores. In Albania, many animals, many birds have returned. But I want to say that I don't want these improvements to go down. And when the quarantine will be over and when the people and the cars will close the streets, how are we going to make these improvements keep going better but not keep getting worse? For example, some local or municipal ongoing strategies that have been in Albania that I've liked are planting the tree or the day without cars. I would like from all of the participants to share their ideas if they have. Like, can we take any other common things that we can do to make these results more improved and not degrade them? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johan. Arlene, the floor is yours. Arlene?
So, Mr. Ambassador, thank you for being here with us. Was it? Okay. Thank you for being here today. And my name is Arlene. I'm a high school student, maybe the youngest here. I want to raise some ideas and questions too regarding the situation of COVID-19 that is causing problems, in fact. And I think that this current pandemic poses a rethink of three main aspects such as the environment, the education, and the economy of the world. So the first of all, as previous speakers mentioned before, the education, the COVID-19 is causing more than 1.6 billion students to be out of schools but learning in a distance way, so online. But we have to rethink about the digital gap we have between countries and also between states like Albania, as a previous speaker mentioned before. Also, the economy is highly influenced from this pandemic as global poverty is going, maybe from the experts that says it's going to happen in the world, and we need to think more about economic models from bricks to clicks. What is the lesson from this? The lesson is that the government should make possible to the poor countries, but not only, to have low-cost access of internet and ICT devices for all students and teachers, and also to teach them more on digital skills. My last point was about the influence that smart weapons or artificial intelligence is going to have in our future, near the future, I think so, because all countries are investing a lot in technology and AI in special, and all young people are learning on technology, programming, and building robots. So technology, in my opinion, is a double-edged sword. Like the fire can cook us, but also can cook the food, but also burn us. So it's like a double-edged sword. And I want to know more that what do you think like countries, not only the UN country, but countries all over the world are going to do, and how going to suffer from the big impact of AI in our society. Thank you.
Arlene, thank you very much. Your questions, suggestions, and comments are noted with thanks. And now I want to let Christy talk about what he thinks.
Thank you, Anas. It was interesting to see that all of you, when you filled the application form, put the disruptive technologies as one of the most pressing issues to the future we want. I mean, maybe living in Albania, you would think that that would not be one of the three top priorities or issues that Albanians would select, but it shows somehow that we are and we think as global citizens. So all the since the world is interconnected in all this globalization, we also perceive the threats and the problems that more developed countries have as problems that we also have and will be having. And of course, that health issues are so prominent now in the selection. I was looking at the preliminary report of the UN75 survey and dialogue issued by the UN, and it also there in the global discussion was among the three main issues, and it had risen, especially after March. So COVID-19 is somehow shaping all the conversation and the way we see the issues of the world. But I would like to mention a metaphor that the Undersecretary General Fabrizio Hochschild used to describe COVID and all these issues. And he said, COVID is like a heart attack that our world is facing, but somehow it's overshadowing all small cancers that we already have. So problems like inequality, the climate crisis, quality education, zero hunger, and so on, they are still there, but we should see this problem, COVID-19, and we should frame a narrative of opportunity. So we should use this crisis right now to see how we can do things better. So all the measures we are about to take are not just to recover from COVID-19. So not to go back to business as usual, as the way we did things before the crisis, but especially to look how we cannot repeat this situation. So how can we focus on all this other illness of our society and of our system, and how we can work to improve that. I always, for me, it was interesting to see how the discourse on COVID-19 evolved somehow from negation at the beginning, oh, it's just the flu, it's not going to cause nothing, and then to the panic raising in all these measures. And it made me think of somehow a parallel, analogy with climate crisis. So if you see somehow it's the same thing, all this, no, it's not being caused by humans. It will not go away. It will go away. It will not be so disruptive. So I think that it's a wake-up call, and we should focus more on this point of view of seeing this situation now as an opportunity to do better and to change what we did or what we didn't do before the crisis.
Thank you very much, Christy. It was such a special point of view and such a special analogy. So with no further ado, I'll give the floor to Barbara. Barbara, please.
Thank you, Anas. First of all, I'd like to give my remark to Mr. Williams about what he said about the engagement in political parties. What I meant by that is that political parties are not a platform for everyone. Not everybody uses its leadership or entrepreneurship towards politics. But a lot of people that have leadership or entrepreneurship skills, they have to create, or maybe they can manage a team of scientists. They can manage or they can create their own startup or business, and they can lead them very well. This is my first remark. The second is I really do not appreciate what was said about the air pollution falling down because of the coronavirus lockdown. I do not appreciate it because I don't think it's a good deal. If losing lives means that the air pollution is going to drop, I don't think that we should advocate for that. I think that we should start making sustainable choices. What do I mean by that? The economy is so important, but we have to make it sustainable. When I've traveled, I've seen poor people, extremely poor people that have found amazing solutions to their lives, to their businesses, and to their families. For example, in Philippines, I've seen a country with a lot of politics. So for example, every time you'd go to an island which was protected by the government, you had to pay more. There were only 500 tickets per day, so only 500 people could get into it, and not more. They were using bamboo straws and all other things. They were building eco-friendly hotels and restaurants. So I think these are the solutions we should start looking at, not actually damaging the economy.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you for taking the time, and I would like to give the floor to Stevie.
Thank you, Enes. Okay, so my name is Stevie Tsanka, and I'm a student at the University of New York, Tirana, studying international relations and political science. So I would like to point out that, in my opinion, actually, the biggest challenge that humanity faces is how to better manage globalization. Because if you take a better look at it, actually, all the above mentioned issues that we were talking about right now all correlate to the fact that we have failed in a way to manage globalization. It is true, indeed, that globalization is the best option we have. There's no doubt about that, because our GDP has improved from like 1 trillion in the 1900s to 90 trillion now, and there's no doubt about that. But if you carefully think about it, globalization is the fact that we have failed to effectively manage globalization is why we have populism, is why we have the increasing wave of populism, but why we also have this incredibly high rate of pollution, and why we have global warming. And the UN, let's face it, has not been effective enough to address it. And this also has to correlate with globalization, because some countries have become all too powerful, and the UN has become incapable of controlling the actions of those countries, i.e. China, i.e. India, i.e. the US. And the same goes for healthcare. The same goes for economic inequality, and etc. And I think that if we focus on, and the most important thing that the UN, the world, has to focus on is on globalization. Why go to Mars when we can make deserts more fertile? Why, and instead of producing many, which is indeed very good, many technological and updated equipment in medicine, why not make them more accessible to the poor population? And if I may one last point on this, it really struck me when Dr. Fauci, like 3 days ago, pointed out to why the African American community is especially prone to getting affected and to die from that, from the coronavirus. And that is because they lack healthcare. They lack access to proper healthcare. And that is not by chance. That is because we have failed to manage globalization properly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for such an exceptional opinion. And Erdiola, please. Erdiola, the floor is yours. I'm afraid that we're running out of time, so I'm gonna shift it to Tatiana. Tatiana, please raise your concern.
I actually just wanted to elaborate a bit on what Christy said about how we should be improving, moving on from the situation that we are currently in. I was reading an article about how China has extended the deadlines that companies have to meet on environmental issues, and that is completely wrong, I believe. That is the complete opposite of what we should be doing, and we hope that other countries won't follow with that, because in one way or another, the normal that we were living is what has led to what we are currently in. So we should not, we are in a way sacrificing the environment to boost economy, because the reason they took this action is so that the economy will go back to what it was, so that it will improve quickly, right? But the point is that economy and the climate and all the other issues should be leveraging each other and not sacrificing one for the other. So I think we should be finding solutions in order for cooperation between all those sections, and not do what China did and extend deadlines on the climate, because what will happen later will be much more dangerous and risky than what we are living right now, I believe, if we don't take action right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tatiana. As expected, this topic generated such great ideas and opinions, but to make it more complete, I'm going to give the floor to Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, please.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for the super interesting thoughts. I'm not sure I can make it more concrete, but I have some opinions, so I'll share them. On the climate and the impact that we've all seen on the climate because of COVID, I think the power of this for me is to show two things. One is how resilient nature is, and the second is to demonstrate that we are totally capable of dramatically improving the environment if we choose to do so. The COVID crisis is a huge crisis. The truth is, it's not nearly as deadly as we thought a global crisis, a global pandemic would be. Let me take a couple minutes to explain what I mean by this. Those who have for many years now, after SARS and after some of the earlier avian bird flu, there are people who have sat around and thought about, okay, what is the risk of a global pandemic? What would it mean? How would countries react? And they kind of had it right. So a lot of those people that thought about what a pandemic would look like anticipated that countries would block their borders, countries would stop air travel, people would have to stay at home, this would have impacts on the economy. They guessed, they foresaw correctly, but they thought it would happen with a virus that killed people at like 10% mortality rates. Whereas the COVID is actually much, much less. So even with something that is not so deadly, I mean, it's terrible, don't get me wrong, but globally, even something that is not so deadly, all of a sudden, we're able to find trillions of dollars, right? Take a look at the US. The US passed another bill yesterday. They've spent $3 trillion in responding to COVID. So when we're talking about climate change, oh no, there's no money. When we're talking about poverty, oh, there's no money. When we talk about, somebody raised it, investing in healthcare for poor people. So big pharmaceutical companies don't investigate the vaccine for malaria because they don't think anybody can afford to buy it, so they don't bother doing the science. And they say there's no money for it. But all of a sudden, you know, a little scare around COVID and boom, trillions of dollars are available. And amongst other things, the environment. But so for me, the power of what's happened is, of course, we don't want to trade off a cleaner environment for the lives that have been lost in COVID. But it is a powerful example that says, actually, it's within our power to do these things, and isn't doing these things a more important thing for our planet than whatever it is we do with the money anyway, buy fancier airplanes or fancier cars or whatever we do. So I think for me, that's a bit the question. We do have to make hard choices, and the COVID, it makes it a particularly stark example of a choice. But we have that choice a little bit all the time. Now, the Albanian government is very happy that the Shell oil company has found oil in southern Albania and is encouraging that company to, take the oil out of the ground. I imagine they're not so excited at the moment because of oil prices, but they will be again once the planes start going again. So, how do you make that choice? Airlines are quite cheap in much of Europe. EasyJet and Ryanair and all this kind of stuff, they're very carbon intensive. Maybe the airplane tickets should be a little bit more expensive, and people should go on vacation once a year instead of twice a year, or once a year they should go more locally. So there are these trade-offs, and how do you decide as a society to make these trade-offs? Well, that's politics. So I wherever she is, Barbara has moved around on my screen. I understood what your point was, but I just wanted to take advantage of the intervention to say that you need to engage with formal politics in addition to the additional stuff, because it's formal politics that leads to changing laws, and they do things like put taxes, carbon taxes, for example, on airplane tickets, if we think that it's something valuable to do. So we need to engage in that. AI and smart weapons. Okay, that was not a question that I was expecting this evening. I am not prepared well to answer that question. But I think AI, I'm going to leave smart weapons aside, and we can go watch the movies. But AI, is the huge unknown, right? We just don't know the impact that that's going to have. And I think somebody else mentioned that we do need to think about the fundamental economic models that we have. Because one of the ironies of the world is that we are much richer than the world has ever been, but we still share that wealth based on employment. But if employment's going to go away, we need to find another way to share that wealth. And we're already headed towards that problem because, you've all read the newspaper articles about whatever the statistic is, the 8 people in the world hold half the wealth of the world or whatever. It's ridiculous, right? But that's going to get worse. And AI has so much potential to help. Even in COVID, I see that they've got AI programs working on, looking at the range of all the known medicines to see if they can't come up with some combinations of existing already approved medicine that might be helpful. So AI can be so tremendously helpful. It's going to put all the truck drivers out of work. So what do we do with those truck drivers? So AI is a huge question, and it goes. I link it to our the previous session where we got into education a little bit, because the access to technological skills is clearly going to be so important for your generation and the generation after you. So we better work on how to make sure that, I think if I were in charge of any country actually at the moment, you have to be investing in education, because otherwise you're going to get left aside. But we need globally to be thinking about a different model, because everybody can't be Bill Gates. It just doesn't work. So we need to find some other ways. Personally, I'm a big fan of universal basic income. But there's a lot of challenges and arguments on both sides of that one. But it's a big question. Was there anything else I was going to say? I think that's good for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. Thank you very much for sharing your opinions for such a broad and essential topic. I'm very amazed of how much ideas and how much concerns were voiced regarding to this topic. but unfortunately we don't have much time to continue with it. So as we proceed, we'll have to jump to the third subtopic for today, which Clyde will elaborate and show us what is it about. Clyde, the floor is yours.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm Clyde and I'm currently acting as the Secretary General at the UN Association here in Albania. Well, we talked a lot now about the problems and the issues we're facing in Albania and all around the world. But of course, after we talk about the problems, rationally you have to go on deeper in analyzing what the solutions could be and where we can focus. So as we know, resources are limited, but our issues, also because of our discussion here, is obvious that our issues are probably unlimited. So we have to make decisions on where to focus and what to tackle first and what would be the most wise and most rational solutions. So that's why we asked all our participants here today to choose among different areas of focus on which they perceive and how they rank them according to their belief, which could be the best solutions and the first and foremost actions that we should take. And what was the most important and the interesting insights we got is that at the top of the rank of the choices of our participants, it was of course, tackling the climate change was among the top, and good governance and public administration, and also improving human development, meaning investing much more in education and a better health system, health systems in our countries and our societies. But what came much lower in the ranking of appealing of our participants was promoting just economic development, which includes social welfare and economic disparities between, well, internally between people within the country, and also externally, meaning inequalities among South and North or East and West. So actually, this was very surprising to see how the Albanian young people believe or actually somehow neglect or rank it much lower in their priorities in dealing with this economic inequalities and injustices. And what this brings us to a very, I believe, very important topic, as economy is, well, as you know, the famous expression of American president, it's economy stupid. So it's for many people, all the world runs around the money. So what this brings us is a very, I believe, a very fundamental question. Do we, as the young people of Albania, neglect just economic system and reducing inequalities because somehow we believe that economy is not a priority in Albania, is an issue that we have already tackled, and we don't have to do much into that, as we are already good, which I would be surprised if many people think of it. But this is one way of seeing why we neglect it, or the other explanation could be because tackling economic injustice and disparities is a much more long-term problem that is much more related to dealing with a better education system and a better healthcare system, and investing much more in promoting much more in good governance and reduce corruption, etc. So I'd like a lot to hear your opinion on this, and yeah, I'd be very happy if I get more insights on your choices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clyde. I'm pretty sure that the elaboration that Clyde made was excellent. Now it's your time to give us many more excellent elaborations and analysis and points of concern, please. Who's going to be first? Okay.
I think Ivana raised the hand. So Ivana raised the hand, I think.
The floor is to Johan first, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I just would like to say on regards of the economy that Clyde said. I'm no economy specialist, that's for sure. But I would like to say that many Albanian people, I think they get disinformed, or they get bad information, or the feedback that they get from the information they listen, they see, it's not the same, or it's not interpreted in the right way. For example, very, very much people I've seen in social media, in televisions, etc., they compare the Albanian economy to other states, big states, Germany, Switzerland, maybe even USA, that they give money to people, they give social assistance, etc., etc. But I don't think it's the point that we should compare ourselves to this much big, powerful powerhouses of economy and industrial and work. I believe we should compare ourselves to Albania or maybe even closer states of us, like, I don't know, Northern Macedonia or Kosovo, maybe Italy, probably Greece, I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Johan. Now it's time to go to Ilvana. Sorry for interrupting you earlier.
No, it's okay. Thank you very much for being part of this debate. It has been really insightful to hear everything about the problems and the solutions that everyone is talking about. It is quite actually when I feel the question and when I ranked the problems, I saw that the same thing as Claudius. I wasn't very sure what to rank first or further, because all those problems seem very actual and very conceptual to every one of us. But about the economy, of course, mine was also the last one, because it doesn't seem very a concept that we can touch, because we see economy like something that is part of the government to tackle. And if we talk about, I remember when I did in my economy class, how do you want to be taxed? I mean, in a progressive way or a flat tax? And we always tend to get into an argument, because we said, of course, we want to have a progressive, so the richer can give more money away. And then the teacher will say, but what if you work a lot for this money and all your fortune goes away to distribute wealth? And we were like, okay, that's a good point. So I think that there are more prominent issues now, like climate change or inequalities, that we have we suffer with them along the way on everyday basis, and that is why we have a tendency to go to see them more often and to tackle them more often. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ilvana. I'd like to see any other question or comment. Yeah, it's Stevie.
Okay, thank you, Enes. About the economic inequalities, and especially the case in Albania, I would like to state my opinion that I believe that universal basic income, for instance, in Albania wouldn't be a good idea. And I believe that because I think that when Albanians are given the opportunity to have a universal basic income, they would get too comfortable. I think that the best way to address economic disparities in Albania is through education. And it might sound very simple, but I know it isn't, and it's very complex. But I think that there are two main things that we can do to address this. First, give everyone the opportunity to get educated, and especially communities like Roma community, which from my experience, I don't know, I have never seen a Roma community person in my school, even though there have been many in my city. And the second one is not only giving everyone the opportunity to educate, to get an education, but reforming education, and especially in Albania, because I believe it's incredibly outdated. And for instance, I've never taken any public speaking classes in my school. I've never taken any essay writing classes in my school, which are absolutely essential skills in order to have a better chance at life, to have a better chance at having a better pay when you get, and to get a better job. That are my 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stevie. So I guess there are no further concerns in here. Yeah, Christy. Yeah, it's Christy.
Thank you, Enes. I think that the point of the question in the application form, I think, was not to, it was somehow to prioritize, but one point or one issue action does not exclude the other. So it's not like we are pitting economy against all the other actions, against climate action, for example. One of the best examples that I can think of are the Sustainable Development Goals. So we're thinking about how we can create a sustainable economy and a sustainable society. So, and how we can have an economy which is a green economy. So if we have a green, invest in a green economy, we will also be tackling climate change, for example. So it's not like we sure do have to make some trade-offs, but it's not, one does not exclude the other. The idea is how to make it everything inclusive and sustainable. What this crisis, one of the silver lining, I think, of the COVID-19 pandemic is that we are seeing what we should be value more and what we should appreciate more. And it's also sometimes going against all the populist narratives. You see it especially for health and social workers. So they are being praised as heroes right now, as the ones that are saving us, but the vast majority of them are women. So we talk about gender equality, and a big proportion of them are migrants. So it goes against this idea of protectionism and closing borders, but those are the contribution that those people have and they make in the economy, but also in the society in general, should be valued and appreciated more. I mean, they are heroes every day. They are not just heroes now. So it seems like we have, a society and our economic system has not been valuing them enough or how much they deserve. And this can change by building new economic policies that somehow give a more appreciation and value to those type of services that we see are really essential. So I think this third session is, I mean, it's linked with the previous one in the sense of we see what are the main issues and then we think what are the possible solutions. So that, in my opinion, should be seen in this point of view and in a sustainable point of view and an all-inclusive and holistic matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christy. Your opinion is noted with thanks. And now I would like to give the floor to Arlene, as I see he has a point.
Yes, I'm going to raise some points regarding the world we want, because I think, in my opinion, the world we want is a really wide, I can't say word when it means the context of world we want. Everyone needs a world we want, but in a different aspect or in a different perspective. As Stevie mentioned about the educational system and the curricula here, which I see as a high school student is quite poor, especially in the public schools, but also in some private schools, because we're not working with extracurriculars, which I think when applying for university or in your future is crucial for your professional life. And also this causes the immigration of fields, which I think is the main problem of Albania right now, because we see many young people which are really good on and have awesome skills in their jobs, on their field of studies, to leave Albania, work and study in other countries, and unfortunately not come back and invest in our country. Immigration, I think, is not only in Albania but worldwide, but Albania has the problem because we don't have people which are, I mean, older than 20 years old who emigrate, but we have youths that emigrate. The youths are the power of a country. So if we let the youths go abroad, we don't have any more power in our country. And I've seen recently, especially from the COVID situation, many doctors from Albania all over the world working in the most important institutions in all over the world regarding the medicine and virus detection. And last, I want to mention also something about the virus tracking that I have two examples, China and Iceland. China has done a smart tracking of people with their chips, microchips in passports, and Iceland has tested all the people, all the population. But we don't see this in other countries. And we have also the chief of a World Health Organization that says without a vaccine, we can turn back in the normal life, but we have to keep the social distancing and other stuff. But we don't only have a vaccine for COVID, but we don't have also a vaccine for malaria. We don't have a vaccine for the SARS, for the previous SARS. So this is a big problem regarding the misinformation of the population, because also the news has been a lot, the information has been a lot, and population sometimes is like confused on what they learn and what they know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arlene. So this subtopic generated very great ideas, but they are not complete yet. And I would like Mr. Williams to make his last remarks about this topic and complete this great debate. Mr. Williams, floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks again for everybody's ideas and thoughts. It's a privilege to hear you all. I think the comment I would make on this one is that in the introduction, there was an emphasis on the phrase a just economy, but a lot of the discussion I heard was around the economy. And I think it's this justice element of the economy, the idea that it's a fair economy, that is something that we really have to work on going forward. I'm thinking a little bit about a story I heard in Albania around the time that I came in 2015. And in the years just before, they had really made an effort to change the way electricity bills were done and the way people paid or didn't pay their electricity bills. And you know, when I talked to my Albanian colleagues about this, when I first got here, I was trying to understand it. I was asking questions. And a lot of them said, you know, I've always paid my electricity bill, but I've often felt like a fool. Because I pay my electricity bill, but I know the guy downstairs in my apartment building doesn't pay his, and the lady upstairs, she doesn't pay hers. And so I'm kind of silly because I'm paying it and they're not. It makes no sense. So, you know, the problem was not paying the electricity bill. The problem was the fairness and the justice around paying the electricity bill. And so many of the problems that we face on a national level and increasingly on a global level around these public goods. So whether it's about the environment being protected, whether it's about paying taxes, the issue is not so much that people don't want to pay, it's the lack of fairness about paying that bugs them. And we need to find a way to get at that somehow collectively. Because if not, everybody retreats from saying, fine, I keep my money and I don't do my bit. And if we don't all do our bits around protecting the environment, around taking care of people, around pollution, around paying taxes, we're going to be in trouble. On the progressive income tax thing, I can't, a small minor detail, the next time you find yourself in an argument about progressive income taxes, absolutely, progressive income taxes do not take away anybody's fortune. So progressive income tax, somebody who already has their fortune, what a progressive income tax does is for the next dollar that you make, okay, we're going to take 40 cents out of it instead of 25 cents out of it, but you've already got all the previous dollars. So progressive income tax is absolutely not about taking away anybody's fortune. It is about when somebody becomes extremely wealthy already, that they don't need to keep 100% of their next dollar that they earn. They can afford to pay a little bit higher percentage into some of those services. There was an interesting comment by someone about, you know, who should Albania compare itself to? And I think it's a really good point. I talk often about Serbia or Austria or Italy or Greece, and for precisely this reason, that it seems a little bit maybe too far a stretch to think about Sweden or Norway. And in talking even about Serbia or Greece, I often talk about the level of spending on social services, on social protection, on education, but also the tax rates. And in Albania, these things are quite connected because the lack of trust in institutions makes it hard to raise more taxes because people don't feel that it's fair and people worry about where the tax money goes. But if they don't raise more taxes, then they can't spend more money on education. I totally agree with Stevie, although I'm not sure he needs a course on public speaking. He seems to do it quite well. But I totally agree that the education system needs major investment and major overhaul. And there's a little bit about that is infrastructure, but a lot about that is around teacher training and getting teachers to think about modern methods where people learn how to learn. The knowledge is available on your phone, so you don't need to learn knowledge anymore. You need to learn how to learn, how to educate yourself quickly, how to do analysis. So, I mean, we keep coming back to electricity, and I think it's a really important point. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. William.
I mean.
Yeah, sorry.
The education.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. William. And I would like to give the floor to Christy so we can jump to the fourth subtopic and let him introduce us to it. Christy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anas. So the last subtopic is focused on, it's somehow something that cuts across all the previous subtopics we have discussed until now, and you have been asked in the application form to select which actors would mostly contribute to shaping the world we want. And you have selected, you have put in the first place national government and governments and public bureaucracy, followed by NGOs, so civil society, media outlets, and interest groups. Then third comes regional and international organizations, which is surprising. And then fourth, businesses and transnational corporations. So this was it was not a multiple choice question. You could select all four of them or just one or two of them. And the idea around this question and on this subtopic is, now that we have discussed some of the issues and also some of the actions, if we could come up with a new and reinvented form of multilateralism and of cooperation in order to push forward this action. So what, according to you, and please go elaborate and go on in as many details as you want, are the concrete actions that governments should do, that civil society can or should do, the international organizations such as UN, regional organization can do, and also businesses and transnational corporation. So, or if you will, which should be, according to you, the best way of collaboration and partnership between these four actors, or you might think also of other additional actors that you think are important to shape the world we want. So during this section, I invite you to share your views regarding the actors and what concrete actions and collaboration each actor can do and can't do. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christy. And without losing time, I'm going to give the floor to Enric.
In electronic engineering.
Yep.
Do you hear me? Because I started talking. Well, all I was going to say was about the threats that, in my point of view, will concern our future locally and globally. And locally, I see that in Albania we lack investments in the healthcare system, and since, in my point of view, pandemics will be a concern of the future globally, we should invest more in healthcare. Why I think that pandemics will be present in our future is that only in the last 10 years we have been facing Ebola, H5N1 virus, H1N1 virus, and lately Corona virus. In a world well connected like ours today, I think that it's very easy to transmit diseases from one country to another within hours. And since our world is well connected, pandemics might occur quite often in the future years. And maybe we should cooperate all globally in order to coordinate our resources so that we can face pandemics in a better way and in a faster response. Globally, in the future, I see a threat, cyber warfare. I believe that cyber warfare will be a serious threat on the future, since society nowadays is going into a digital society. Everything will be connected to the internet, and maybe we will have organizations or states, countries that want to manipulate or even damage another country's information systems. And there have been cases in the last year, as the case with Russian influence to manipulate US elections for the president of US. And we can mention also the sabotage that Israel and USA did to Iran in order to sabotage the initiation of
the interruption, but you have to conclude your point because we're a bit out of time. Sorry.
Yeah, and all I was going to say is that pandemics, cyber warfare, and also environmental issues will concern our future globally, while locally we should focus more on healthcare system, education, and sustainable economic development in order to think in long-term goals. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henrik. Please, it's time for Angela to make her point.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angela. I have a bachelor's in political science international relations from the State University of New York. And I actually like what everybody has been saying, that, you know, we should care about the environment. We need to have more equality as far as jobs and everything. But I also have noticed, from speaking from my own personal experience being back in Albania and not having success finding a stable professional job with my degree, I want to be like all those other millennials, like start being a photographer. But I wanted to say that everybody actually does need to be involved, but I think more so the civil society, NGOs, nonprofits, more so than the government, because I think the past 29 years of democracy in Albania, we have seen no matter what party has been in charge, in some way, shape, or form, it has failed the next generation in all the things that we value the most for our futures long term. And I think that instead of lobbyists like they have in the United States in Congress, our lobbyists need to be our generation. People that work, whether they have their own private company, they work in nonprofits, other forms of civil society involvement, they need to be in parliament, like, as much as possible, whether in not just in the seats, but in major issues when there's debates, so that we get our voices heard. Like, I'm 28 years old, and for most of the stuff that I see online that I want to be involved in, there's like the cutoff age for youth now is 18 to 25. And I feel so sad sometimes because I want to get involved in so many things. I have so many great ideas for some things, but like, you have to be part with board members. You have to know other people to create a group and all that stuff. Why can't there be more social entrepreneurship? Because with social entrepreneurship, we can solve all the other global goals that the UN has, from poverty to healthcare. You know, everything is sort of interconnected in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you very much, Angela.
Thanks.
I'll give the floor to Daniel.
Yes, thank you, Enes. So picking up on the topic which Christy presented, on the actors which are able to deliver change. Well, as in the previous question, all the options he presented must be in place and well developed in order for change and to come. However, I am too surprised that regional organizations are in third position, as it's not my idea is that it's not about the actor more than about the instrument, and the instrument for tackling issues is governance and policy making. And the institutions which hold the exclusivity of governance are national governments and the regional organizations. However, considering the interconnectedness which has been brought up many times in the argument, the idea is to let go of the sovereignty of the national governments and transfer the competencies to an international organization which is able to coordinate the action and deliver the results for everybody, for each country. As considering that the actions of one country has an effect of another country. A national government on its own cannot deliver the products, the necessary change. And considering that that governance is the instrument to tackle such issues, I would like to come back to a point which was raised earlier even by Claudia, the idea of having good governance, the principle and the practices of good governance. In an attempt to have and create an underlying theme for all the discussions we've been having, I believe that good governance can enable change, can enable the proper policies to come in place and deliver the results for all the other emerging issues, whether it be climate change, whether it be new technologies, and all the other that was mentioned before.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Without losing time, the floor is to Gela. Gela?
Hello everyone, I'm Gela Toramani. I'm 16 years old and I'm a student at high school. But of course, that won't stop me to show you my opinions and thoughts. If we talk about the survey that we did and the topic about the actors that might impact our future to shape a better future, then I chose the governments and also the international organizations. If we talk about international organizations, I think that, yeah, they should have a greater impact. If we talk about the United Nations, I don't think that the problem with the impact is related to the architecture or the story structure, but it's more related to what people think that this organization should do. And that's not related to the belief that we as people have, but also the states have. And these organizations should not be just the ones that make states together, make states collaborate, but they should always give the opportunity to them to do something together to change the future, to do something together to make it brighter by making the environment even safer, by ensuring us that, yeah, if we encourage people to do something, then we can make a better future. And we relate this to the European Union, because it's in an international organization. There are some states that are still members of this organization, and Albania is one of them. But what is the problem with this? We have to negotiate all the time, and we're at standstill. We don't do something else because all the other states, because of political reasons or other ones, we don't know, think that no, you can be part of this because you haven't got the other regulations or you haven't changed the ones that you have. But don't we think that if we become part of this organization without kind of borders, sample of collaborating and maybe seeing the other states what they really do and helping our own government and state to do such thing. And the last one is about governments. Yeah, they have a greater impact because every government has the power to make some new regulations, policies, and to find out the right way to do something for its own state. And if we talk about this, yeah, every
sorry for the interruption.
State, every government.
It's time to conclude your opinion because you have run out of time. Please, you have 30 seconds.
Okay. So we should always aim as governments, as international organizations, or only as people that to make the future brighter, we should be focused on development, sustainable one, and also on protecting our own selves, our health, and our education too. And that's what we all aim. That's what we need to do, despite all the ways or all the regulations that governments might have to do such thing. And whatever it is, we should be together, we should collaborate, and believe that if we do something better, yeah, we can shape a brighter future.
Thank you very much, Gela. Now, please, Mr. Williams, the floor is yours to make the final remarks about this topic.
Thank you very much. Again, super interesting comments. The engineer, I'm an engineer by training also, so I have some sympathy for that. And I think, you know, your comments about cyber warfare are kind of aligned to the discussion we had earlier about artificial intelligence. There's the potential damage, or the potential good and potential damage, the power that these computer networks, digital networks, and information that are being assembled around the world is impressive and scary, and we don't really know where it's going to lead. You know, wait until we as humans start having implanted things in different bits of our bodies, which will undoubtedly be helpful for something, but also takes a leap in evolution that kind of leads us down a path where, you know, we really don't know where we're going to get. So I think, I mean, in terms of the near future, again, it's a reason to invest in education. But I think you're absolutely right that looking a little bit further down the road, it's really hard to estimate and predict what kind of impact this is going to have on our societies. Angela, the points around social entrepreneurship, totally agree, fantastic. I think the more networks that people can get creating out there, the better. We should be using the ability to connect so easily digitally to create movements. But you still need a movement, and the movement needs to some connection, and have it actually influence either the laws that are made, or the policies that are made, or the behavior of an institution that you're trying to impact on. And I think it's really hard, particularly in a, let's call it a hybrid democracy like Albania's, which is still in a both economic and politically developing. It's hard to make those changes without engaging somehow with the political powers that be, and that's political parties to some degree. So it's challenging. You did say that, in your opinion, all political parties had failed Albania so far. I do want to put a little. Someone had a coffee cup earlier. I do want to put a little bit of the glass half full into the conversation, because I've been in Albania since the end of 2015, and I haven't worked anywhere else in the Balkans, but I've met a lot of my colleagues, international workers, who have been around the Western Balkans since the mid-90s. And when they talk about how Albania has changed, from the mid-90s, for sure, but even from 2010, when I talk to people who, they come here and they were last here 5 or 6 years ago, and they think it's amazing, the changes that have taken place. And by the way, it's not just Tirana. I mean, yes, it's especially Tirana. Tirana has changed a lot, but even around the whole country, the way things have changed. And it's not just the beaches either. It's also Korcha. It's also the access to the country, how quickly you can get around the country, and its other towns as well. Albania is a tremendously dynamic place with tremendously dynamic individuals, entrepreneurs, private and social. So there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of very positive potential there. It's not a reason not to be ambitious. It's not a reason not to be frustrated with things that are not working. But there's a lot of good potential there to work with. So don't be overly discouraged. A number of people, Daniel, you said the word good governance, but in a way, a number of people were touching on that topic. And I think absolutely this is the question. A lot of the issues that have come up all evening, education over and over again, but also healthcare and also the environment. It's really hard to make real progress on education or healthcare or environmental protection without government. I mean, government really is the key actor for making changes in these areas. So I think it's important. This goes to the question about how do you influence governments and political power. I am surprised at two other sectors, though, that did not get mentioned very much. One is the justice sector. So a lot of how you get at the fairness of an economy, which is about enforcing contracts. It's about all economic actors competing, but in the same arena and in the same way. It's about access to information. It's about fair decisions that protect people from things that maybe companies are trying to do. So the justice sector is really important here, and I also think the judicial reform process, although it's been a little bit bumpy, and I'm sure it's slower than what everybody hoped for, myself included, it is also pretty remarkable. I've seen judicial reform processes in different countries, and the one that is going on here is quite important. But I was surprised, maybe after you can think about this, I was surprised that you didn't talk about the justice sector more. And final comment is about the private sector and business. I mean, at the end of the day, most job creation is done in the private sector. It's not done in the public sector. And so the private sector knows how to be innovative. They know they are the ones who employ people. And so a lot of the real change that will occur in, I don't know, protecting the environment or finding ways to do business that are less polluting, a lot of that actual work will end up being done by the private sector. So it might be the government that passes the law that says, sorry, you can't pollute in this way or that way anymore. It's the private sector that then figures out how to deliver a service, how to produce something without polluting the environment. And so the private sector is really important. In the Sustainable Development Goals, we're supposed to be thinking, I know for UN75, we're supposed to be thinking even longer term, but even for the Sustainable Development Goals, everything that we say is, you know, they will not be achieved without the private sector. So we need the public sector and governments to be thinking about policies, but we need the private sector to really be doing things. So don't underestimate the value of the private sector. Last comment is on a number of people made the comment about relating to regional institutions. I think it's super important. I'm totally in favor of opening accession negotiations for Albania. And one of the reasons for that is because there should be more connections between European institutions and Albanian institutions, and that can help with the transparency, that can help with the skills, that can help with the institution building that needs to occur so that we get better governance and a more just, let's say, a more just arena, a fairer playing field where private actors can compete for good ideas. Just a few thoughts. So interesting to hear all of you. So let me stop there and back to you, Enes.
Massive thanks for delivering such insightful remarks, Mr. Williams. Now, as we see, we are getting close to the end of our time together, and I would like to summarize the topics that we covered. Firstly, we made an insightful analysis of the progress made from the UN to advancing multilateralism and liberal international order. Secondly, we covered one of the hottest topics nowadays, the issues that mostly impact the sustainability in the future. There, we have to mention some very key moments or key comments that were made that said that we should focus on digital gap. The government should enable that, especially in situations like this, where all students and teachers should have access to the internet and laptops. And another key comment in this topic was that we have failed to manage globalization properly. Then we jump to the sea of action that mostly contribute to shaping the world that we want, where it is important to mention that it became clear that although a just economy remains a controversial element, as such it may become tangible only as a result of salient policies and inclusive governance approaches. And last but not least, we mentioned and analyzed the actors that mostly contribute in achieving sustainable future. They were all incredible picks and a great job for everybody who participated. Now I have a set of questions that are going to be asked and were collected from the social media. Should the UN and other NGOs offer more opportunities for young people for young people or the Balkan to get involved in social entrepreneurship without bureaucratic red tape? Which is the best solution to handle COVID according to SDGs? Or how can SDGs help economic recovery after the COVID-19 pandemic? These are three questions that were picked from social medias and would like to share with Mr. Williams. Furthermore, I want to mention one point from Barbara, which unfortunately didn't have time to be covered earlier. She states that UN has obviously fostered the spirit of cooperation and provided an important forum for all different cultures, nations, and voices. But in my opinion, it hasn't done much in advancing and promoting democracy, freedom of rights. What position will UN hold on this issue in the following years? That's a question from Barbara. And now, apart from this, I have a question from you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, if there is one thing that you'd like this audience to take away from this session, what would it be? The floor is yours.
Thanks. Sorry, did you want me to answer some of those other questions that came in too, or I'm just answering the one message at the end?
Okay, yeah, you can do it in the end. It's okay, as you feel.
I think if there's one message that I would like everybody to take away, it would be to get engaged, and whether that engagement is, through an NGO, or whether that engagement is in your the town that you originally came from and thinking about somehow helping out with education, or whether it's taking this kind of conversation forward with 5 friends at the next occasion, is to somehow get engaged, because the problem is that the status quo is a bit worrying. So the inequality that we see around the world is itself not sustainable. I think it will lead to greater alienation of many people. Everybody can see with a smartphone what the wealthy people of this world have, and the frustrations will grow if they don't have it. So we need to figure out how to address inequality, and the way to do that is to build movements and create voice that makes a difference. The Greta Thunberg this year, is a wonderful example of how somebody young can really capture the imagination and can constrain the environment. Those who are deniers of climate change have a harder time now because of Greta Thunberg. They have to answer the questions that she poses, and the people that support her. So, the big message going forward, I think, is to get engaged.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. And I want to thank you and state that we are truly privileged from having you tonight. Your support in times of pandemic means a lot to us, encourage us to continue fulfilling the mission of UN75. On the behalf of UNYA, I'm glad that I hosted our first event regarding to UN75 and gathered such exceptional ideas. We really do appreciate your interest in these very important issues. Fellow participants, I'd like you to massively thank you tonight for the interest shown tonight, but before officially ending this event, I'd like to request 2 things from you. In the instructions we sent in the email and in the beginning of this session, we all requested to draw something like this. We want to frame a good memory for Mr. Williams. We want to frame a good memory for UN75. This is the first session, and this is the first event that we are holding in the range of events regarding UN75. So please, all of you who have drawn this thing, hashtag join UN75, put it on camera so we can capture a picture and frame a good memory for all of us. Thank you very much. And I guess our marketing and PR team have captured this moment. And secondly, I want to invite you all to show your massive respect and support to all people out there combating the global pandemic of COVID-19. Please, a round of applause would be very welcome from all of us.
Okay, I'm not sure applause works very well on Zoom. Everything else has worked pretty well, but I don't know, the feeling.
I think we should unmute everyone.
Maybe that'll work better. Yeah. That's a good idea. Let's try that.
Okay.
Try unmuting everybody. Yeah, there we are. Try that.
Okay.
Oh, that's better.
Bravo! To our heroes, the nurses, doctors, first responders.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Christy, the floor is yours for some final remarks.
Thank you, Anas. So I hope you all enjoyed your time, and we all value your contribution. This was one of the several activities that we are thinking of organizing in the framework of the UN75 Dialogue. So activities that will go on from now to September in order to conclude the project. Of course, we had to adapt to the pandemic. They were thought initially a bit different, but we are not discouraged, and we are trying to find an innovative way how we can reach more youth and more people in general to join the dialogue. I'd have a last recommendation and suggestion for all of you. If you like the conversation and if you're interested in further participating in UN75 dialogues, you can also encourage your friends, you can encourage your colleagues, but not just your peers. I mean, even people from other generations, because this is an intergenerational dialogue. And we as youth can act as bridges to have this kind of dialogue. So don't be afraid to ask also your parents or your teachers to join, to first of all, fill in the 1-minute survey. And then these discussions, encourage them to participate in other dialogues, but why not even create initiatives and dialogues whenever they are in different cities, communities, schools, using Zoom or whatever you can think of. Be creative and promote the debate, promote the conversation further on. And I would like to thank once again, Mr. Brian Williams, and we hope we're going to have other discussions similar with the UN in Albania involved in the framework of the UN75. And from me, a big thank you to all of you.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Enes. Thank you.
And by looking forward to a brighter future together, where all of our concerns will be given the right space, I wish you all a good night and have a good weekend. Thanks again for participating tonight.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. Thank you.